People often say, the truth will set you free. But there's a darker, more brutal side to it that history seldom speaks of. Sometimes the truth comes as a sentence. A private medical record, once confidential, becomes a public spectacle for the entire nation to gossip about. A once happy marriage is suddenly declared void by a court, all because of a single biological fact. An A-list star, known for their dazzling career, finds themselves forced to abandon the very thing that made them famous, just to gain the right to look in the mirror and smile. Today, we'll uncover the 8 most shocking files of those who were thrust into the spotlight, their most personal truths exposed for all to see. These stories reveal the price of visibility and the cost of being forced to live out your truth for the world to judge. From the prejudiced 1950s to the brutal digital age, what did they sacrifice to preserve their dignity? When the spotlight fades, does freedom truly remain? Before the velvet curtain is lifted, if you're a fan of deep, human stories, give this video a like, comment where you're watching from, and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the powerful truths about to be revealed. These stories aren't just about fame, they're about survival, resilience, and the human cost of living under society's harsh gaze. Stay tuned. Let's turn back time to mid-20th century New York. It was an era where America, intoxicated by the dream of post-war prosperity, was also a time when any deviation from the norm was met with harsh consequences. In a society that demanded absolute conformity, gender was not up for discussion. It was something to be enforced. Christine Jorgensen grew up in this suffocating atmosphere where differences were not celebrated but punished. She quickly learned a brutal survival rule. Safety lay in blending in, and privacy was the only shield protecting her from the cruelty of a society that demanded conformity. But as time would show, Christine's journey would ultimately challenge the very rules of the world she once tried to navigate in silence. After completing her service in the U.S. military, where masculinity was revered like a religion, Christine made a decision that would ultimately change history. In the early 1950s, she quietly left America for Denmark. Her purpose wasn't to seek fame or create a revolution, but to find medical care for a deeply personal struggle. At the time, American medical institutions refused to acknowledge the distress Christine was experiencing, dismissing it as pathological rather than recognizing it as something deeply intrinsic to her being. She sought a solution not for societal approval, but to free herself from the inner torment that had long defined her existence. This journey would mark the beginning of a transformative path, one that would challenge both medical norms and societal expectations, forever altering the conversation about gender and identity. Her intentions were humble, to heal, to change, and to quietly integrate into her new life as an ordinary woman. She sought nothing more than to blend into the crowd, to live a life of peace away from the prying eyes that had always followed her. But those quiet aspirations were shattered in 1952. When Christine returned to America, she wasn't met with the privacy she so desperately craved. Instead, she was thrust into the harsh glare of blinding camera flashes and ruthless headlines. Her return ignited a media frenzy, and in an instant, she became the focus of unrelenting investigations and public scrutiny. The ghosts of her past, which she had tried so hard to bury, were brought back to life, forcing her to confront the very trauma she had hoped to leave behind. What was meant to be a personal transformation became a public spectacle. GI veteran becomes a blonde lady. The press turned her deeply private and painful medical journey into a national spectacle. Rather than seeing her as a person seeking happiness and self-realization, they reduced her to a bizarre phenomenon, there to satisfy the morbid curiosity of the masses. Headlines stripped her of ownership over her own body and identity. The media dissected, mocked, and debated her existence, all without her consent. Christine Jorgensen lost all control over her own story, as the world turned her personal transformation into a public spectacle. What was meant to be a quiet reclamation of her life became a relentless exposure, and the price of that attention was her autonomy. She didn't choose the timing, the words, or the tone when the world spoke about her. Her story belonged to the public before it ever truly belonged to her. The price was steep and permanent. Career doors slammed shut. Her personal relationships were scrutinized under an unforgiving microscope, and her body became the battleground for every societal fear and anxiety about gender in mid-century America. Yet, it was in that darkest moment, when everything seemed beyond her control, that Christine Jorgensen demonstrated extraordinary dignity. Rather than allowing herself to be consumed by the public's gaze or retreat into silence, she held her ground, embodying the very courage and grace that would eventually change the conversation about gender for generations to come. When retreating into the shadows was no longer an option, Christine chose to adapt with pride. She stepped onto the stage, not to entertain but to reclaim her voice. She gave speeches and answered interviews with sharp composure, wit, and intellect. It wasn't out of obligation that she educated the public, but rather to assert ownership over her own life, wherever and whenever she could. In doing so, she reclaimed her narrative, refusing to let the world define her on its terms. Christine Jorgensen lived for decades under the spotlight she never sought, enduring its glare with a strength that would inspire countless others. She passed away in 1989, but her legacy endures, reminding us of the power of self-determination in the face of relentless public scrutiny. Her legacy isn't defined by her fame, but by the precedent she set. Christine Jorgensen taught the world that dignity can be maintained with grace and composure, even when the world is shouting ridicule. Her life raises a haunting question that still lingers today. Does the truth of a person need public permission to exist? Through her journey, Christine showed that the answer lies within the individual, that true self-ownership and authenticity cannot be dictated by society's approval. She left us with an invaluable lesson on grace amidst the storm, proving that even under the harshest scrutiny, one can stand tall, hold their ground, and redefine what it means to live with integrity. We cannot control what others say about us, especially when the truth is distorted. But Christine Jorgensen proved that when the world tries to turn you into a joke, the strongest form of resistance is not anger or shouting, but holding your head high. Dignity isn't found in the words of others. It lies in how we choose to respond. Christine didn't let the headlines define her. Instead, it was her elegance, intellect, and unwavering sense of self that redefined those very headlines. She showed us that true power lies not in fighting back with fury, but in standing firm with grace and conviction, no matter how the world attempts to shape your story. What do you think of this woman's courage in the heart of 1950s America, a time rife with prejudice? Leave a 1 in the comments if you agree that calmness and pride are the strongest forms of resistance. Or comment 0 if you believe, if it were me, I would choose to retreat and seek peace instead of confronting. Enjoy the video, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to show your support. If Christine Jorgensen's story is about the media's gaze, then April Ashley's story is about the cold cruelty of the legal system. Born in Liverpool in 1935, April grew up in a conservative England where gender identity differences could only exist in 2 forms: a secret to be kept hidden, or a scandal that would destroy one's reputation. From an early age, April knew who she was, but she also learned the harsh lesson that survival often depended on silence. In a society that rejected deviation from its rigid norms, she understood that to simply exist, she would have to navigate a world that demanded conformity while denying her truth. This would shape her journey, a journey not just of self-discovery, but of fighting to exist without apology in a society that would not make space for her. In the 1950s, April fled England to Paris, the capital of freedom, where she could finally access the surgery she had longed for. Afterward, she returned to London, not to challenge society, but to blend into it. She became a model, beautiful, elegant, and mysterious. All she wanted was to live, love, and work in peace. But that fragile privacy was shattered in 1961 in the most devastating way. A British tabloid exposed her past. No consent, no respect. They stripped away the layers of her personal history as if it were merchandise, all to sell newspapers. In that moment, the world she had worked so hard to create, one of quiet dignity and personal fulfillment, was violently ripped apart, and her past was thrust into the public eye, no longer hers to control. In just one night, her brilliant modeling career was reduced to dust. Invitations vanished, friends turned their backs. April Ashley's name, once associated with fashion, beauty, and elegance, became tainted in the eyes of the public, now a symbol of controversy and deceit. But the most devastating blow didn't come from the press. It came from the court. In 1963, April married Arthur Cameron Corbett, a nobleman, hoping for a life of normalcy. However, when their marriage unraveled, instead of a quiet divorce, Corbett filed for annulment, claiming that April was a man. This legal battle, not only public but deeply personal, placed her identity under a microscope, and the court's ruling forced her to relive her most painful truths, making her a target for further ridicule and stripping her of any remaining semblance of privacy. The 1970 Corbett versus Corbett case became a stain in British legal history. The court issued a brutal ruling, declaring April Ashley legally a man, relying solely on her biological sex at birth and completely disregarding the reality of her life, psychology, and current body. This judgment not only annulled her marriage, but also stripped her of the legal recognition of being a woman. In one fell swoop, the court reduced the complexity of her entire existence to mere chromosomes, ignoring the depth of her humanity and the profound journey she had undertaken to live as her authentic self. The ruling underscored the cruel and simplistic view of gender identity held by society at the time, one that failed to acknowledge the lived experiences of those who did not fit into its narrow definitions. This decision set a harsh legal precedent that lasted for decades in Britain, imposing restrictions far beyond April Ashley's own life. But what did April Ashley do in response? She endured the ruling, but she never accepted erasure. She continued to live her life on her own terms, writing books, becoming an advocate for transgender rights, and remaining a living testament to the injustice that had been done to her. She didn't transform herself into a martyr. She simply affirmed her existence unapologetically. Her resilience wasn't about seeking revenge or vindication. It was about refusing to let her story be defined by the limitations imposed on her by others. April Ashley's quiet strength and defiance in the face of legal and social adversity became an enduring symbol of perseverance, showing the world that one's identity cannot be reduced to a ruling or a label. April Ashley passed away in 2021 at the age of 86, having witnessed the law change to finally recognize people like her. Her legacy is one of quiet resilience, a life that, despite being battered by legal and societal forces, refused to be erased. Her journey poses a troubling question to our collective conscience. Do courts have the right to define a person's identity? Or is the law's duty simply to acknowledge and protect that identity as it is? April Ashley's story leaves a profound lesson about resilience against systemic injustice. She taught us that the law, and the prejudices that often shape it, can be outdated, cruel, and wrong. Yet, even when the systems of power failed her, she lived with dignity and fought to ensure her truth could never be denied. Her life remains a powerful reminder that resilience, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, can alter the course of history. The court may have stripped her of her legal status on paper, but they could never take away the truth of who she was. April did not let the 1970 ruling define the rest of her life. Instead, she chose to continue living, loving, working, and shining brightly. Her happiness and fulfillment, which lasted until the age of 86, served as the most powerful rebuke to the prejudices that once tried to erase her. By simply living proudly and authentically, April Ashley demonstrated the most extraordinary form of resistance. She proved that no ruling, no societal judgment could diminish the depth of her truth. Her existence was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the unwavering power of self-definition, regardless of what the world or the law might say. Let's turn to another icon, whose story isn't about a public gender transition, but about rejecting labels altogether: James Dean. Born in 1931 in Indiana, James Dean grew up in a post-war America that was yearning for stability and rigid gender roles. Men were supposed to be strong, stoic, and dominant, while women were expected to be passive and submissive. But from the very beginning, Dean was an outsider. He didn't conform to the expectations of masculinity that society had set for him. Instead, he approached acting not as a technical performance, but as an excavation of raw, painful emotions. For Dean, the craft was about peeling back the layers of vulnerability and truth, allowing his characters to express what was often hidden beneath the surface. His ability to convey such deep, emotional complexity became his trademark, and it's what made him so unique in the world of Hollywood, where the facade of perfect masculinity often dominated. Dean didn't fit into any one mold, and perhaps that's why he became such a timeless symbol of rebellion against societal expectations. He sought truth within, rather than the outward glamour. The success of East of Eden and Rebel Without a Cause turned James Dean into a symbol of rebellious youth. But the bad boy image that Hollywood created for him was far more rigid than the complex person he truly was inside. Film studios wanted to package him into a standard masculine box, fitting him into the trope of the defiant, troubled young man, a character that audiences could easily understand and consume. Gossip columns relentlessly pried into his private life, questioning his sexuality, demanding a clear answer. Who was he? Who did he love? Hollywood, obsessed with labels, couldn't fathom someone who refused to be easily defined. They couldn't accept his refusal to conform, and this discomfort with his ambiguity only added to the allure and the mystery of Dean. He was a man who did not fit neatly into the roles assigned to him, and that defiance is what made him a lasting icon. What did Dean do? He rejected the very premise of those questions. He refused labels. James Dean was famous for saying that he didn't want to live a life with one hand tied behind his back. In the 1950s, ambiguity wasn't a safe choice. It was an act of defiance. In a time when societal norms demanded clear-cut roles and definitions, Dean's refusal to be confined to a specific identity was a radical statement of freedom. He chose to live authentically, not as Hollywood wanted him to, but as he truly was, and in doing so, he protected the rich, private inner life that Hollywood couldn't touch. Yet, that defiance came at a cost. He was relentlessly followed by the media, speculated about in gossip columns, and robbed of the privacy most people take for granted. He was rarely able to experience a peaceful moment. Despite his fame, Dean's life was defined not by the adoration of fans, but by the constant intrusion of a world that couldn't comprehend his rejection of labels and definitions. Ambiguity protected James Dean, but it also made him a magnet for scrutiny. Then, the break came suddenly on September 30th, 1955. The tragic car accident took James Dean at the age of 24, freezing his image forever in mystery. His death, so young and so sudden, solidified the enigmatic persona he had cultivated during his brief life. James Dean's legacy is not one of a revealed identity, but of an identity fiercely protected. By refusing to let society define him, he exposed the public's morbid need for certainty. His life and death became a symbol of resistance against societal pressures to conform, showing that sometimes the most powerful statement one can make is not through the answers they give, but through the questions they leave unanswered. Dean's story is a poignant reminder that the world often seeks to categorize, label, and define, but some individuals, like him, are destined to remain beyond definition, forever elusive, forever a mystery. His story sparks a profound reflection. Is true freedom not found in declaring who we are, but in the right to remain an undefinable mystery? James Dean left us with a philosophy ahead of its time: the right to ambiguity. In a world that constantly pressures us to define ourselves, choose sides, label ourselves, and expose every corner of our souls, Dean reminds us that keeping a part of ourselves mysterious is not about hiding lies, but about protecting our inner freedom. By refusing to conform to societal expectations and insisting on the right to remain undefined, Dean demonstrated a radical form of self-ownership. His ambiguity wasn't a refusal to engage with the world, but a refusal to be confined by the world's limited understanding of identity. It was a call for autonomy and an invitation to embrace the complexity of being human, without the need to reduce it to a single, simple definition. He taught us that you don't owe the world an explanation of who you are. You have the right to be an unsolved question. The complexity of a person cannot be contained within simple labels, and refusing to let others define you is the most captivating act of rebellion. In today's social media era, where people seem to be sharing too much and exposing everything on platforms like Facebook or TikTok, there's a sense that we might be losing the alluring mystery that James Dean once embodied. The constant need to curate and share every moment of our lives in the pursuit of validation or connection can sometimes strip away the complexity and depth that made individuals like Dean so captivating. Today, everyone feels compelled to define themselves, to be seen, to be known, in a way that often leaves little room for the ambiguity and mystery that once made a person's essence so magnetic. In contrast, James Dean's refusal to be fully revealed was a form of power, one that left others intrigued, questioning, and yearning to understand him. Does the pursuit of visibility in modern life diminish our ability to remain enigmatic and, in turn, diminish the allure of true self-possession? In the face of the harsh treatment from the 1950s media, Christine chose calmness over anger. Do you agree with her approach? Comment 1 if you agree that calmness is the sweetest form of revenge. Comment 0 if you think she should have protested more strongly. Enjoy the video and don't forget to like, share, and leave a sub to support the channel. Caitlyn Jenner's story is one of the shadows before the spotlight. For so many, gender transitions happen quietly, unseen. But for Caitlyn, The real tragedy was not merely living in a body celebrated by millions, but in a body that never reflected her true self. Born in 1949, she once personified the American dream, becoming Bruce Jenner, the 1976 Olympic champion. Her name graced Wheaties boxes, symbolizing strength, discipline, and an idealized masculinity that America adored. Yet, beneath the praise and glory, her soul was always yearning to be somewhere else. Her reputation was constructed on a foundation of authority, a facade of unwavering strength. But behind that stability lay decades of suppression, a silent battle fought in the shadows. Then, in 2015, Caitlyn made the courageous decision to reveal her true self to the world, gracing the cover of Vanity Fair. The media response was nothing short of explosive, a whirlwind of both admiration and ruthless critique. Her body, once a symbol of national pride, became fodder for public dissection. Her past was relentlessly unearthed, and her authenticity was put under a harsh, unforgiving microscope. The complexities of Caitlyn Jenner's life deepened as she became entangled in political and legal controversies. She was no flawless role model. Her opinions often sparked division, and her decisions sometimes stirred intense debate. Yet her journey unearths a raw and unsettling truth. Fame comes with its own set of unforgiving rules. Once you are thrust into the spotlight as an icon, the luxury of making mistakes, the kind an ordinary person can make, slips through your fingers. Once Caitlyn's truth was spoken, it was no longer hers alone. It became a constant subject of negotiation and scrutiny, under the gaze of millions, every single second. Caitlyn Jenner's story offers a profound lesson on the dual nature of fame. Once the truth is revealed, it ceases to be your own. It transforms into public property, subject to endless scrutiny. True courage isn't merely in proclaiming, "This is who I am," but in the unparalleled resilience needed to stand firm while the world watches, judges, and critiques every move. The lesson here is clear. Never trade your inner peace for temporary applause, because while the cheers may eventually fade, the judgment will linger forever, echoing in every corner of public perception. Do you think the public is too harsh in not allowing celebrities to make mistakes or have flaws? Comment 1 if you agree that everyone deserves a second chance to live authentically, no matter how glamorous their past may be. Or comment 0 if you think, when you're a public figure, you must accept more scrutiny than an ordinary person. Enjoy the video, and don't forget to like, share, and leave a sub to support the channel. Beyond the glittering red carpets of Hollywood lies the raw, gritty reality of the boxing gym, where we meet Patricio Manuel. A rising star in the world of boxing, Manuel was once a formidable amateur fighter, even eyeing a spot on the 2012 U.S. Olympic team. But fate intervened when a shoulder injury during the Olympic trials brought his dreams to a halt. In the silence that followed, standing before the mirror, he was struck by a realization. A far greater battle awaited him. The fight to embrace and reclaim his true gender. The decision to transition and become a man forced Patricio Manuel to sacrifice the career he had fought tirelessly to build. The sport that had once been his sanctuary, his home, suddenly rejected him, slamming the door shut with a cold finality. The system that had supported his journey now struggled to place him. The boxing commission hesitated, leaving his fighting license suspended indefinitely. Opponents refused to enter the ring, either out of fear or prejudice. His body, once revered as a fighting machine, became a topic of medical debates in sterile rooms, where his future was decided by people who had never stepped foot in the ring, let alone worn a pair of gloves. "6 years. That was the length of time Patricio Manuel was forced to live without his passion. 6 invaluable years of his youth slipped away in the shadows of waiting, a period marked by loss, his sponsor, his coach, his income, yet never his resolve. Despite it all, he never stopped. Every day he showed up at the gym, the sound of his fists against the punching bag echoing in the dark. He trained relentlessly for an opportunity that no one promised would ever come. In December of 2018, history called Patricio Manuel's name. At Fantasy Springs Casino, he stepped into the professional ring for the first time as a man, facing Hugo Aguilar. When the bell rang, there were no politics, no medical debates, only 2 men and their punches. Manuel endured real hits, bled, and emerged victorious by the referee's unanimous decision. But that victory, though monumental, wasn't the perfect cinematic ending. After the brief moment of glory, reality struck hard and relentless, reminding him that the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The search for opponents remained a constant struggle, as many refused to face a transgender fighter. Patricio Manuel found himself isolated in a world that had once been his home, a place that now turned its back on him. Yet, in the face of such rejection, he chose silence. A silence that spoke volumes, a silence filled with the unwavering pride of a warrior's bloodline. In that silence, Manuel made a powerful statement, not for the cameras or the headlines, but to assert his truth. "I step into the ring not to do politics. I fight simply because this is my profession. It is my breath. It is my entire life." Patricio Manuel is a living testament to the power of perseverance against a system designed to exclude. He teaches us that true inclusion isn't forged through grand speeches on social media, but through the quiet strength of standing your ground, even when the world insists you don't belong. When the door of opportunity closes, don't waste time standing there, crying or justifying your presence. Instead, use your unyielding determination to break that door down. The deepest respect isn't earned through sympathy, but through the scars you bear and the skills you master. As the 21st century dawned, many believed things would be easier for Gen Z. Yet for Hunter Schafer, the pressure didn't vanish. It simply morphed, becoming more subtle, more insidious, and unrelenting. Raised in North Carolina, a place where gender expectations were deeply ingrained yet quietly enforced, Hunter found refuge in painting. Art became her sanctuary, a place where she could express her inner world without uttering a single word. But that fragile peace was violently disrupted in 2016 by the harsh realities of politics. When North Carolina passed HB 2, a bill that restricted transgender bathroom rights, Hunter Schafer, then just a teenager, was thrust into the role of plaintiff in a landmark lawsuit. Her identity was immortalized in court records before she even had the chance to establish herself on her own terms. Fame arrived not through her own choosing, but as the result of a legal battle. As success followed with her role in Euphoria, a new kind of pressure descended upon Hunter, the pressure to represent. The media, eager to exploit her story, demanded she recount her pain, transforming her into a living textbook on gender. Hunter responded with remarkable intellect and grace. She carefully narrowed her access to the world, refusing to allow her life to become a tragedy for public consumption. Instead, She channeled her energy into writing scripts, directing, and painting. In doing so, she solidified her identity as a true artist, not a mere instrument of propaganda. Through each of her works, she demonstrated that creativity wasn't just an escape from the past. It was the most potent weapon she had to reclaim control over her own narrative, to define her future on her own terms. Hunter Schafer imparts one of the most vital lessons of the digital age: the right to set boundaries. You do not owe the world your personal story, nor are you obligated to educate others with your pain. Hunter's legacy is built on the power of disciplined presence. She exemplifies that fame and success do not require sacrificing your soul or privacy. In a world that constantly demands more, she shows us that protecting the sanctity of your inner world, the garden of your soul, is what truly matters. In a world dominated by social media, where everyone is racing to share everything, Hunter Schafer's decision to protect her privacy is a bold and powerful choice. Comment 1 if you think this is a smart and courageous decision to protect herself. Or comment 0 if you believe openness and sharing is the best way to connect with today's audience. What's your opinion on privacy? Leave your number in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and turn on notifications so we can meet again in the next inspiring stories. Next, we dive into the glamorous yet ruthless world of fashion through the incredible journey of Andrea Pejic. Before becoming a sought-after icon in Paris and New York, Andrea's story began in the turmoil of war. A refugee from Bosnia, she grew up in refugee camps, where fear was a constant companion. It was this harsh past that forged within her an unbreakable survival instinct. When Andrea stepped into the fashion industry, she brought with her a beauty unlike anything the world had seen before, an androgynous allure that defied conventions and blurred all boundaries. Andrea Pejic quickly became the darling of legendary designers like Jean-Paul Gaultier, achieving the unimaginable, walking both men's and women's collections in the same runway show. The fashion world adored her ambiguity, seeing her as a unique muse, a mystical, androgynous figure that captured attention and brought in money. But beneath the glamorous exterior, the industry kept her trapped in a gilded cage. They celebrated her indeterminate beauty, but ignored the true person behind the facade. Her gender, once a source of fascination, was commodified, sold to the public as just another spectacle. In 2014, Andrea Pejic faced a life-altering decision. She yearned for surgery to fully transition into the woman she knew herself to be. But as she contemplated this deeply personal choice, the cold warnings from the industry's kingpins came crashing down. Don't do it. Your career will end. You'll lose your unique factor. You'll become just another ordinary female model among thousands, and no one will hire you anymore. The risk was immense, an uncertain gamble that could cost her everything she had worked for. Yet, in that moment, Andrea had to decide: live authentically or remain a pawn in an industry that only valued her as a spectacle. If Andrea chose to live authentically, she risked losing the multi-million-dollar career she had painstakingly built from the ground up. But if she continued to play the role of the beautiful boy, she knew she would slowly die inside. In a bold act of self-determination, Andrea chose to bet it all. She underwent surgery, publicly embraced her new identity, and revealed her true name. She didn't see the transition as a reinvention, but as a completion of who she had always been. And when she returned to the runway, She was no longer a bizarre phenomenon for people to gawk at. She was a powerful supermodel in her own right, proving the industry's doubts and limitations wrong. Andrea Pejic became the first openly transgender model to grace the covers of GQ and Vogue, shattering barriers along the way. She refused to let her body become a spectacle to satisfy crude curiosity. Instead, she let her professionalism, icy composure, and top-tier catwalk skills speak for themselves, demanding that the world take notice of her true talent. Her allure, she proved, wasn't born from the ambiguity surrounding her gender. It was rooted in her craft. The lesson from Andrea Pejic is one of core value. Never let others define your worth based on their convenience or the fleeting novelty of the moment. Uniqueness may catapult you to fame in the blink of an eye, but it is talent and professionalism that will sustain you in the long run. When you choose to live authentically, you might lose those captivated by mere curiosity, but you will earn the respect of those who genuinely value your abilities. It's not provocation that breaks down prejudice. It's perseverance. In the end, it is those who remain persistent and sincere, who stay true to their craft, who leave an indelible mark, ensuring they are never forgotten. Finally, let's talk about Elliot Page. To millions, Elliot is not just an actor. He's a part of cinema's fabric, an indelible presence etched in the memories of audiences worldwide. We watched him grow on the big screen, from the quirky, pregnant teen in Juno to the sharp, calculating architect in Inception. But the tragedy of Elliot's story is intertwined with that very fame. From the time he was a child in Canada, Hollywood molded him into a perfect image, a glossy, idealized version of himself. The glamorous gowns, the towering high heels, the heavy makeup, what the world celebrated as beauty felt to Elliot like invisible chains, confining him to an identity that never truly belonged to him. Elliot had to embody the movie star not just on screen, but in his everyday life as well. The more successful he became, the wider the chasm grew between his public image and his true self. For years, Elliot lived in the shadow of depression, retreating from the spotlight and feeling as though his body was a foreign vessel that didn't belong to him. In 2014, he made the courageous decision to come out as gay, a bold step forward, yet still not the whole truth. The sense of discord lingered, and the relief he felt was only temporary, as he continued to wrestle with the mismatch between the person the world saw and the person he truly was. In December of 2020, Elliot Page made a life-altering decision that could have easily marked the end of his career. He came out as transgender. Hollywood had never been kind to transgender men in the acting world, and he knew the risks were immense. He could lose everything: contracts, roles, and the affection of a mainstream audience. Yet despite the potential fallout, he moved forward with courage. And as anticipated, the scrutiny came crashing down. People began comparing before and after images, dissecting every change in his body, reducing the immense talent of an A-list actor to nothing more than a spectacle of appearance and surgery. Elliot Page chose to face the backlash with remarkable courage. He didn't retreat into the shadows. Instead, he returned to the red carpet, this time in a sharp suit, radiating a newfound confidence that had never been seen before. He shared a shirtless photo by the pool, a radiant smile lighting up his face, the smile of someone who, for the first time, felt truly free in their own body. He didn't trade his suffering for sympathy. He shared the joy of living authentically, owning his truth. Elliot Page leaves us with the most profound lesson. It's never too late to save yourself. Elliot Page teaches us that fame, money, and the world's expectations become meaningless if you're not at peace when you look in the mirror. True courage isn't just about fighting the world, it's about daring to shatter the golden cage of stability to claim the right to breathe, to live, and to laugh without restraint. The happiness found in freedom is the ultimate success. And once you embrace who you truly are, you no longer fear the challenges ahead because you realize you already have everything you need to live authentically, without the need for external validation. As we close today's journey, we come to understand that freedom has never been free. These 8 individuals have sacrificed their fame, careers, and even their privacy in the pursuit of one thing: the right to live authentically. Whose story resonated with you the most? Leave the name of the person or share your perspective in the comments so we can discuss together. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to continue exploring other hidden facets of human life with me. Thank you for your company, and see you next time.